Hello, Blenders, and welcome to episode number 225 of Real Blend, a podcast that doesn't let ourselves get attached to anything that we are not willing to walk out on in 30 seconds flat. Kevin McCarthy. Okay, we feel the heat around the corner. My name is Sean O'Connell, the managing editor at Cinema Blend, and we'll explain why we're making heat references later on in the show. In addition to all of that, we're going to discuss some of the HBO Max Batgirl fallout that happened. And I know it's a little bit old by the time you guys listen to this, but there's still plenty of topics to get into in terms of like what happened with that and the implications it's going to have on the industry moving forward. We have A24's Bodies hitting theaters, and that means that director Halina Reijn is going to join us to discuss the film as our main interview. And by us, Kevin McCarthy is joining us on the show from Fox 5 in Washington, D.C. Hey, Kev, how are you?
Sean, how are you? I'm fresh off my fourth viewing of Nope, and I am just in that continued deep dive into that film, and I appreciated the Heat reference, and there's some cool, exciting things happening in the world of Heat. If you're a fan of those of that movie, that we're going to tell you all about. But Michael Mann is back in a big way, so super excited about that.
So someday we're going to have to circle a date and have a conversation about Nope, Kev, because our ships missed each other. I went on vacation and we had the whole Tarantino thing in the middle of it, but we might be on different pages with Nope. But I need to see it a second time before we get too far down that conversation.
I know Gabe is with me, and I think what we'll have to do, you know me, I care so much about this stuff. I would love to sit with you and watch it, because one of the things I've been doing with Nope is I've been talking to a lot of people after they see it, and I end up having 30, 45-minute conversations about thematics. My parents hadn't been to a movie in 2.5 years, and I convinced them to go with me when they were visiting. It's a masterpiece, man. I'm trying to be better about using that word is too much, because I do use the word masterpiece a lot, just because I'm enthusiastic and I love these films, and they mean a lot to me. But this is the ambition in this film, and the filmmaking is just truly astounding. And anybody listening to our show right now, if you haven't seen it, get to a theater to see it if you feel safe. And obviously check out our Jordan Peele interview. All
right. As Gabe mentioned, Gabe Kovach is filling in for Jake Hamilton, who is on assignment. And so the guys have been introduced, and we're going to get to housekeeping in a hot second. I want to let people know that in addition to our interview with Halina, that's going to be popping up in the show in a little bit, we have a very special segment that's made possible this week by our friends at the National Association of Theater Owners, and talking about how movies are back, essentially, and how people are feeling more comfortable going back to theaters, and that movies are doing well. So stay tuned for that in a minute. Just to get through some of the talking points, as you know, we're on YouTube. Hopefully you're watching the show here. We're seeing a lot of engagement with people who are checking out the show on the YouTube channel, to be able to watch a video when we have for different directors, or listen to someone like Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avery. That was a really great show that people have been finding. Go to youtube.com/Real Blend podcast to do that. And then, of course, we have the Real Blend Premium, which is a special episode that drops every Monday, where we tend to play a game or get into a mailbag or go deeper into some of the circumstances that surrounded some of our interviews, like Tom Hanks in Nashville, or Nashville? Memphis? Where were we for that
Memphis.
one? Memphis. Gotcha. That's right. Graceland. Or the strange happenings of the day that we interviewed Quentin Tarantino, which included going to Kevin Smith's house. So check the description for more information on where you can sign up for Real Blend Premium. There's a movie called Bodies that A24 has out, and Gabe and I have been talking about this ever since we saw it at South by Southwest. It is a very unconventional sort of spin on the Agatha Christie's 10 Little Indians concept, where there's a group of people in a location and they keep dying one at a time, and you sort of follow along to determine who it might be, or what else is going on. There's a sort of big picture mystery happening. We are thrilled to have the director of that film, Halina Reijn, joining us for a conversation about her new horror film and her spectacular cast for Bodies. So without further ado, Halina Reijn, talking Bodies on the Real Blend podcast. Hi, Halina. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. I'm Sean O'Connell. I'm with the Real Blend podcast. I normally have two other hosts with me, but with vacation and everybody running, I'm handling this one on my own. But it's good because I love your movie so much. I saw it at South by Southwest for the first time. And then I was able to catch up with it again last night. And I just want to start by asking about South by and what it was like being in the Paramount and seeing an audience experience it for the first time.
Yeah, so South by was, of course, such a defining moment for me because this is only my first American film. I everything is new, you know. I basically moved to another country for it, so my whole life changed. So going into this to South by Southwest, I was so nervous. And also there was just a birth of a film, right? We didn't know, did we actually pull off this tone that we wanted, genre bending, you know, it's a dark comedy more than anything else. And then to be in this huge theater with so many people, you know, before it started, I was literally dying. And then, you know, the audience reacted in the way it did. And then you were there. It was very wild and loud. And people were not only laughing, they were also reacting like verbally to the screen, which I thought was absolutely amazing. So that moment to me was defining. Like that was when I thought, okay, maybe, you know, I can actually entertain people with this film. Maybe, hopefully, I can actually like touch people with this film.
Oh, it's one of the most entertaining movies I've watched this year in any genre. It's not just horror. It's the script is so fantastic and your direction is incredible. So this is a filmmakers podcast. I wanted to encourage you to get as geeky as you can about the details of putting the film together. And so to that end, because the mansion is almost basically its own character, I'm curious how much time you spent discussing the geography and the layout of the house as you moved your characters around it.
Of course, it was incredibly hard and also important that we would find a house that actually had all the different rooms that we, you know, created in the script. Because first of all, I was limited as far as budget. I was limited as far as shooting days. So I was so aware of that. And then in the script, we were just like typing away, you know, and there's a basketball court and there's a, and so to find that was a huge challenge. So once we found this crazy mansion that was totally overpriced, nobody wanted to buy it. And it was already deteriorating. There were like dead mice in the pool. It looked really, we cleaned all of it out before people started to worry about my actors. But I loved it. I just thought it was a great metaphor for the broken American dream, if you will, because it looks a little bit ridiculous, but also beautiful at the same time. And then half of the movie takes place in the dark. So we needed to have a house that, you know, could also carry that and the claustrophobic feeling, even though the house is so huge. It was important to me because that's, of course, the mental state that they're going to be in, right? They're going to feel like more and more entrapped after the Wi-Fi goes down. So, yes, we did discover the house for 2 weeks. Me and my DP went in there. We sort of had stand-ins because we couldn't rehearse so many weeks with the actors. So I had like people there and I could actually like make choreographies of how I wanted to plot out all the scenes because there's so many group scenes. I wanted to come super prepared once I had the talent on the spot. So we spent 2 weeks in that house just acting out all those scenes. I would also act them out myself because I'm an actress. I'm retired, but I need to like feel it before I can direct it.
And then to that end, so through those rehearsals, what changed the most, if anything?
A lot of things were changed because you know, you can in your head, and we have storyboards, and you can think it all out. But the space itself will just force you into certain movements. And I think also working with my stunt coordinator, pulling off all the deaths, things just change because again, you can think, well, and then we throw her out. You know, there's a moment where B gets thrown out of the house. But to actually do that, like how, and for me, because the film, even though it's a parody, even though it's a comedy, to me, the film is also hyper realistic. So I did want all the fights to look real. I come from the theater. I work with Ivo van Hove. He doesn't like stunt coordinators. Everything needs to be real. He comes from the 70s, from performance art. So even though I do work with all the coordinators and create a very safe atmosphere, I do want it to look super real. So a lot of things that I thought about in my head, especially the ending, you know how the ending is. Yes. To actually pull that off physically is a very different ballgame. You can think everything out and make drawings of it and try it yourself, but to actually make a certain actor, specific actor, do it physically is a whole different thing. So that will also dictate how you use the space.
Halina, you mentioned how so much of the film takes place in the dark. Just talk to me about the obstacles of filming a movie in the dark and some of the tricks that you use. I love how your use of neon, you know, in certain aspects, and flashlight beams. Like, what are some of the creative ways that you came across of overcoming shooting in a largely dark location? Yeah,
so I think the best idea that I had myself on script level was to make it a hurricane party. So to make the whole gathering a hurricane party, because that way we could already have them, they knew the power would probably be cut out. That's how Americans, they actually exist, these hurricane parties. So they prep. They become preppers.
Sure.
So they had some emergency lighting, they had some flashlights, and that would of course give me and my DP the opportunity to then later create some light at least. But because us coming from radical art house in Europe, we really wanted to make it real. So they actually had to light each other with their iPhones, which is of course an extra layer to them already having so much on their mind as actors. But I think that works really well. And then to have Rachel Sennott, who plays this great character Alice, we decided to change her just into a lighthouse. I was like, because they're all preparing to be beautiful for this party, and she uses these emergency neon lights around her neck as jewelry and around her wrists. And then later, of course, she becomes a source of light for the others as well. So it basically, I mean, before I started shooting, I really thought, oh my God, is this going to be our downfall, the dark? People going to get sick of it after 5 minutes. But it actually paid off in this sort of style that we found, and this sort of, and it's very cinema-like, and it became very inspirational. So I'm super grateful.
Oh, it lends to the suspense completely, because you're constantly looking around the frame to see what you might be missing. The way that the characters in the house would be also. It puts you in their shoes.
Yeah, and that was, of course, very important to me, because I wanted to have this style, even though we're doing this sort of cliche slasher genre. I wanted to make it very visceral and primal and animalistic and sensuous as well, almost sexual, in every scene, even though there's not a lot of sex in the film at all. I wanted to make it very erotic. And I think for you as an audience member to be in the middle of that and not knowing, do I want to be part of this group? Is this group very scary? That was the goal.
You mentioned Alice. I'm just curious what her podcast is about.
Yeah, so for people who haven't seen the film yet, so from the very start, it's obvious that Alice has a podcast, and the other ones have their opinions about it. But yeah, no, I mean, Rachel brought this wonderful lines to the film where she goes how much it takes to create a following, and do they even realize how hard it is to pull it all off? Well, you know that, so she's a genius girl as far as improving, and she did such an excellent job as the character of Alice.
Well, I mean, one of the things I love so much about the movie and your approach to it is how the use of so many modern, technological elements, apps and Wi-Fi passwords and everything modernizes it and really puts us in the headspace of the demographic, of the people who were at the hurricane party. And I'm just curious, when the cameras weren't rolling, how much your young cast was filming themselves on set or living chunks of their lives on social media. Did it reflect the art, essentially?
Well, it does. I mean, they know that I come from a classical theater background, so they were very focused on everything on set. But of course, that is their world, and especially now when we're on the press tour and we were at Comic-Con together, and of course they're also encouraged to do that because it's great PR for the film. But they are constantly, making TikToks, and that's their whole world, and listening to music and showing each other things on their phones, it's how they communicate, and that we use that, of course. And I also asked them so many questions about it, because I did say to them, listen, I want this to be very authentic. I want you guys to actually take your friends to the cinema and be proud and not feel like, oh, we're making, these old people try to make this film about Gen Z. So it was really a collaboration, and I wanted to use their way of communicating. And to be honest with you, it has also become my way, all of our ways, right? Because we're all addicted to our phones, and we all, we're communicating through a screen right now. Sure. So I do feel that it is technology is just, a problem that we all, and of course also something beautiful, but something in our lives that has now taken us over completely.
Well, I feel like you will not get enough credit for this, because if you do it too much, the commentary becomes heavy-handed. And I think that the way that you utilized their use of the technology was so perfect through this, so that the characters were likable, and still you were rooting for them at this point. They weren't obnoxious to the point where, a lot of horror movies, you have these characters who you can't wait for them to die. And instead, I loved all of your characters and wanted them to somehow make it through.
They do. And of course some of them are very dark and they're toxic and they're narcissistic, but I think they're also relatable, because we see parts of ourselves, and we see how, especially with young people, how everybody now grows up in front of a camera camera. Normally that would be something actors would deal with, and how they would be so afraid what they look like all day long, and that made them into narcissists often. And now it's like everyone. So it's of course also a very harsh thing to deal with. And I feel that making an entertaining movie about it, but at the same time secretively having this darker message, I hope that we can succeed in that.
Maria keeps showing us new sides of herself as a performer, and in this movie in particular, I think you draw on like a vulnerability that I haven't seen in her before. So what was it like tapping into that aspect of her personality?
Yeah, of course I saw her in Borat, and I immediately was obsessed with her. And in Borat, of course, she shows us how genius she is as somebody who can improvise, but also somebody who's just has these comedy talents, and she's actually classically trained just like me. And so we share the same background, both European. And I think this part is actually really hard because a lot of these other girls and boys get a lot of jokes, and she, for her, it's she's more the outsider. She's witnessing this all taking place. And that is not often the most, gratifying thing to do. So I feel she's showing her range like beautifully, and I'm obsessed with her, how she's of course a beautiful woman to look at, but at the same time she has no vanity, she has no ego, she transcends any of that, and she becomes this beast in this film, and you even start to suspect her, even though that's almost not possible. It's still because when you see it you will notice the murder mystery of it all, but because of how she acts and how I just love her whole energy and how she pulled this role off. It's really incredible.
Oh, I love that you brought that up next, because I really want to go in that direction. If there were any bits of direction that you gave to your cast to almost throw the audience off, like to behave a certain way, to maybe keep us guessing, because I was surprised a lot of times with these whodunits, once you know the result, how rewarding is it to go back through. But on my second watch, I was just as entertained, and I was trying to look for little bits and pieces. So what did you sort of sprinkle through to make sure that your audience was kept on their toes?
I think I'm really fascinated by honesty in even the most absurd circumstances. I was already that as an actress. Like I think my whole acting style was always very vulnerable and raw, and just trying to let the audience look into my soul. So I'm trying to tell them to do, even though we're doing a comedy and we're going to make jokes, I really want you to like totally open your, like you play with your deepest wounds. I want to see them all. You can keep them for yourself. You don't have to tell me about them, but I do want your honesty at all times. So I think that authenticity also helps weirdly with the murder mystery. But also what I would do is take different versions. Like you can play a little bit like that, do it a little less, do it a little, so that I later in the edit could choose like how far, because for instance with Lee Pace's character, who's the outsider, he's an older guy that Alice brings in through Tinder is what we discover, like a date. Nobody really knows him. And of course, he becomes a suspect. So with him, we really tried to do different things, like I literally said with the big scene in the basketball court that you will see if you see the film, I literally let him play it very innocent, very evil, very like I just have him do all these different things. And that gives me the opportunity later to really make that puzzle, because I know I was going to have to channel Agatha Christie to even, get where I wanted to go with this.
Well, I love it because you build in a game inside the movie, so there are times when people don't know if you're still playing the game also.
Exactly. So of course the whole metaphor of it being like they play the game until the very end, like they and the whole film is one ritual and it's comment on the game. It is the game. It's super meta. It's of course a satire. Yeah.
I'm wondering if there are any specific sort of horror movie cliches that you either wanted to go out of your way to avoid, or maybe tackle them and sort of flip them on their head.
I feel I'm not a horror expert, but I did feel like all the horrors that I, of course, watched over again, or I wanted to go around the cliche of the characters, like the innocent one, the beautiful one, and especially we live in a new time, which is so exciting to me, where we can actually go beyond that, and we don't need that. And also, I don't believe in good and evil. I believe we're all beasts and we're all capable of killing and we're all capable of doing horrifying things. So I wanted to be these characters to create them in a way that they're super layered and that you don't really know who you can trust and who you can hang on to. Just like Bee feels really when she enters that house, she doesn't know, who is lying, who is truthful. Are they really vain and narcissistic and just big egos, or are they lost and lonely? They are all of that, and in the end, as you know, when you know the ending of this film, it basically is there is no evil guy or girl doing all of this. No, it is in us. What does it take to become an animal? What does it take to become a beast? What does it take to become a killer?
And they can be pretty mean to her from the start. You know, it's a slew of like inside jokes. You never want to be the newcomer in a group like that, a group that has known each other for years.
And I think we all know this feeling. We all have been in situations, whether it was when we were still in school or later in life, where you just want to belong so badly. And we all feel like imposters or aliens, and we all feel not pretty enough and not intelligent enough and not this enough. And I certainly felt that in my life a lot, as an outsider, and I think this is just a universal feeling that we all can tap into. And that's also a big theme in the film, of course. And what is she capable of, to do to start to belong to this group,
Right. Halina, whenever we get a chance to speak with directors, they'll tell you that party scenes and nighttime scenes are the most physically exhausting to shoot. Oh, so you made an entire movie.
It's the entire movie.
Yeah, you made the entire movie.
It's only my second film. No, but I think they're right, though. First of all, night shoots are completely horrifying and exhausting, especially if you get a little older like me. And second of all, party scenes are really hard. But in our case, that dance scene, that really long dance scene, it was one of my favorite shooting days ever. We basically locked them up into a room with my DP. And I told them, like, they had little assignments, like this needs to happen then, that needs to happen then. But the rest, I just gave them freedom, because at that point we rehearsed so much. They knew the characters so well. And it was so beautiful to watch them and just to see all of this evolve and the tension between them. I think a huge draw for people to go see this film is literally the chemistry between the actors. And again, there's not a lot of sex in the film, but the film is so erotic and so sensuous and so primal. And the chemistry in this group is just insane.
Mm-hmm. The amount of screen charisma that Pete Davidson has also is just off the charts.
Wonderful, his face, his energy, even when you do camera tests, before you start, just to see if the colors match and the makeup. And even then, my DP, Jasper, who has seen a lot of this hardcore European DP, he was just like mesmerized by him. Even though he was just acting goofy, because we made him just stand in front of the camera and he got really awkward. But it is just an absolute joy to work with him, and he has something absolutely magical.
Did it take a while to find that pink outfit that he rocks?
No, we have a wonderful designer, and she's stylist, and she came up with that. It's a supreme pink suit, and I thought it was really great, because even though he represents in this film with this character, this toxic masculinity, that is super attractive, but at the same time very dark and driven by fear, of course. Right. And so I thought it would be really great if he would be wearing pink clothes. And he can pull it off,
Is there more of a backstory to his character having the black eye?
Well, it's basically, he says that Max has done it. So I think that of course, you can discuss forever, like, is that really true? I think it is. I think there is a love triangle going on with, Emma's character, which is played by Chase. She, everybody says about her, you always think everyone is in love with you, and, right. and so Max is maybe in love with her. And, so there was a fight between, I think what I wanted to say is that's also why, and I don't know if I spoiled too much, but the men die first. There's a big theme in this film about male, toxic masculine behavior, and also how the pressure on men to be competitive. I mean, that's really baked into the film till the very end, of course, how they need to perform and need to be the most powerful. And so I think Max has been part of that triangle a little bit.
All right, we're going to dance around the ending a bit, because I certainly want everybody to experience it themselves. But to that end, anytime you have a murder mystery or a whodunit of some sorts, it only works if the ending is satisfying. And so I'm curious at what point during the process that you had your ending. Was it always that ending and you were just working towards it?
So I think when we came up with the idea for the ending, that absolutely excited me. That is, to me, the ending is the key for me personally into the whole film. Like, when we thought of the ending, that's when I knew I could do this. That's when I knew I could actually make it my own and not betray my sort of like what I built my whole life to be, which is, darkness. Like, I wanted in the end to say something hedonistic almost about and nihilistic about life, because I feel we're all going to die, and that's an absurd thing that we know we're all going to die, yet we sit here, like, we dress up, we go through the motions, war is happening, people are dying, and it's crazy. So I feel the ending was just a great idea, but then on the page it worked, right? But then how do you do it in a way that people actually believe it? And so it was something that gave me a bellyache until South by, really. That was the first time that I know, okay, I think this is going to work.
Okay.
But I have been really sick to my stomach about that ending, because I think as an idea, it's really, 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 really great. But, you can only wait for people to not see it coming, or to actually, have a reaction to it. And up until now, the reaction has been very loud and intense.
Yeah, God, it's so true, because you go through this entire film, and if that ending doesn't land, it's enjoyable, but you'll come out leaving saying, yeah, but if only they figured that out. But you did it.
Yeah. So I am proud of that, and on all of us, because of course we did that as a team. But I'm very in love with the ending of the film.
All right, I'll get you out of here on this one, because I'd be remiss not to mention the music. Your music choices are fantastic. I love the fact that a lot of times the music that's playing in the background will work its way into a scene. So I'm curious how you maybe use it on set to keep your actors in the mood.
I love your questions. You're the first to mention this, because this is something that I love, and I just thought nobody's ever going to notice. But yeah, so I love to use score and extra and needle drops, and make that blend all of that, and make it abstract, really, because am I in their heads, or am I actually there with them, or am I watching a film? I don't know. So so we have a lot of needle drops there. I took a lot from the girls themselves. They came up with their playlists, 212, the dance scene, and I actually play that. I'm very much like, it's horror for the sound people, of course. Sound department goes insane, but I want them to really feel that party mood, so I play that out loud for them. And sometimes, of course, you have to do little bits where you cut it out, but I really wanted them to hear it. And then one of my very dear friends is Jim Taihutu. He's a director from Holland, but he's also a DJ. They called Yellow Claw, and they make very, how do I say that with respect, because they're insanely popular, but it's a little trashy, their music. And I love that kind of like vibe, the techno vibe. And so I have them and that kind of music where you don't know, do they play it on their phones, or is this score?
Right.
You don't know that. And then I work with Disaster Piece at the same time, a brilliant composer who also scores, It Follows, but also video games, and he's a DJ and he's an artist. And I told him, I don't want you to go into any emotion, no emotion for the girls. Because we're just witnessing this, this film is just, these are animals, and they're slowly starting to eat each other. And so we created this based on TikTok vibe kind of soundtrack to distort that and make it artistic and make it our own. And it just drives the story forward, and it doesn't really reflect, because I feel the moment you would reflect with these characters, the movie stops, because then they would actually look around and be like, oh, wait a minute. You know what I mean? So you can't have them stop.
That's so fascinating too, because you also probably factor into the attention span of the modern audience and how long you can keep them in a scene and a shot.
100%. And we're playing a dangerous game, of course, as you know, with this film, because that is a hard thing to do with this concept, that with the ending and everything that we, of course, know that is going on, that puzzle, and to keep them to keep the audience keep watching, keep believing, and make it believable that they don't see it. I mean, all of that the music contributes to, and also I wanted to feel at moments that you're in a club, that you're in a music video, but with awareness, in a sort of a meta perspective. So I said to everyone working on this film, don't be afraid to be trashy. Bring your trashiness, bring your low culture here. That's what I want. That's, for me, that's pop art,
That's the tagline. Bring your low culture here. I want that on the poster. Okay, so for the music alone, and because of your visuals, that's why we're extremely excited for our listeners to go see this in a theater and experience it with a big crowd. I'm just curious if you could tease a little bit of what you're working on next. Do you have a script in play, or what can we look forward to?
I definitely want to continue to work with A24, because I'm totally obsessed with them, and we're going to make an erotic thriller. So I'm going to go, I used to work with Paul Verhoeven as an actress, and I want to continue to carry his torch.
That's a great baton to pick up and keep running with. He's a unique voice, and I'd love to see if you can replicate it.
Exactly. That's my goal.
That'd be fantastic. Well, Halina, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. This was amazing. Thank you for your super smart and fun questions. I really enjoyed it. Even though you were alone and you're supposed to be with all your colleagues, this was amazing. Thank you.
I'm the best of the three, to be honest with you.
There you go. So I was lucky.
Yeah, you lucked out. Good luck with the film. I can't wait till people see it.
Bye. Thank you so much.
We want to thank A24 and, of course, Halina for coming on the show. Bodies is going wider? Is it going wider this week?
Wide this week.
It's going wide this week?
New York, LA last week, and then why this week. I do have a quick question before we roll on.
Fire away.
I don't know if this is a quick answer. Best A24 film.
Jeez, oh,
Best
Pete,
A24. I'd have to spend time thinking about that.
I would.
Is that a blend game? Can we give a studio a blend game?
I feel like we should, and
right.
they seem like they earned it. The first one that popped to my mind, although I really do have to survey what their landscape is, but I would go with the Bling Ring. I love the Bling Ring.
Really?
Oh, what a great one, dude! That oneer that Sofia Coppola has, where we're outside of Paris Hilton's home,
up on the hill, and you're watching them walk through it.
The whole oneer is so
tremendous.
Great. I go to Spring Breakers weirdly, but
interesting.
But I need to go back through. This would be a good blend game.
This is a fun blend game. Yeah,
that's A24 film.
I'll take note.
A little way.
I'll take note.
But Bodies is kind of up there. It's got a terrific script.
Well, we have Everything Everywhere All at Once this year as well. Like,
oh geez, yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's
their highest grossing film of all time.
Is the Lighthouse A24?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think so.
Wait,
Lighthouse?
is A24 like? And I don't even know where I'm going with this, but like they're kind of like the cool studio.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Like in a weird way of like, it's cool to talk about.
They're the hipster studio, and I mean that as a compliment. But there's a level. They've gotten to a point where they have that following that is into it because it's A24, and not necessarily about anything else, which is great. I think it's great. I think like the fact that they've built themselves up as like a name. When people say like, oh, they're only gonna invest in a movie if they think it's an interesting idea.
It's like Criterion almost, right?
A little bit, yeah.
A label like that.
The perfect example was at South by. We're watching X, which is an A24 film, another great A24 film. And when the logo came up, the crowd, again, we're at South by Southwest, so we're in the crowd for it, but the crowd cheered the logo at the front, and then the director came out and was like, well, since you guys cheered you guys are the right crowd for this, here's a sneak peek at the sequel or the prequel.
It is.
Oh yeah.
That's a really interesting history that I wouldn't mind going back and looking at. Like how they got their start, how they found that brand, because I remember
what happened the first 23 times,
But is there a story as to why they're called A24?
Probably.
I'm sure there is.
Because
24 frames a second, maybe.
That's a great answer. I just remember seeing Spring Breakers, and I remember that tone of that movie because that was Harmony Korine, right? And I remember seeing that and going, oh, this is like there's A24. I just think of a bunch of different colors all at once. Like it's such a vibrant. They just have a very specific tone to their films. I would love to see like their pitch meetings, because Everything Everywhere All at Once is different from everything they've ever done, but yet it feels like an A24 film. You know what I mean? It's like it's really kind of a weird. Wasn't Northman? Was that A20? No, that was Focus.
No, that was Focus.
See, that's the thing. Like, there's the Fox Searchlights of the world and the Focuses of the world, and sometimes I get mixed in of like who falls where sort of thing.
There's Paramount Vantage. There was like all these like
working films. And
to give A24 credit, though, I think A24 in large part is why, like, I think they pushed those names, those labels, to invest in more interesting things that A24 is making successful. Like, I think they're a part of that movement. I think they've earned that position.
Midsommar was a big one. And they're really launching people. Like Florence Pugh launched from a A24 film.
Well, look at the Daniels now, giant deal at Universal.
Yeah.
Like,
5-picture deal at Universal after.
Was it 5-picture or 5 year? I think it was 5 year.
Oh, either way, they just crossed 100 million.
A
couple weeks ago. And that film is amazing. I'll tell you right now, it's funny because that's a film that, when it comes out, you don't know if it's going to find, you don't know, like A24 films are interesting. You never know if they're going to find a large audience. Like there's a niche group of people who watch their films, but Everything Everywhere All at Once is kind of like, I would argue, has transcended that and breached that barrier, because I live in an apartment building, and sometimes and this sounds creepy, but it's not creepy, but you can actually see sometimes, depending on the time of day, like you can see like into someone's apartment, and if a TV is playing, it's pretty obvious. And if you walk outside, and I just saw some random apartment watching it the other day, I'm like, and again, I don't know if that doesn't mean anything, but like I just find it
face against the glass.
No, I just find it. It kind of made me. It made me happy because it was like it's a film that I didn't. It's a film that I love, and obviously it's become a worldwide success. But a lot of A24 films do fall into a category of like, my mom and dad will never see that or see this, or my neighbor or whatever. It was just cool, like seeing it kind of everywhere now.
I'm pretty sure that they're backing greatest director of all time, Darren Aronofsky, when he does
Wait.
The Whale.
The Whale's A24?
I'm pretty sure it's
I'll check.
A24.
That's interesting.
Okay, so now I know we're like down a rabbit hole here, but like eighth grade is A24. The Green Knight is A24.
Yeah, there's too many.
The Witch is A20. Kev, a Ghost Story is A24.
Ghost Story might be their masterpiece.
Their masterpiece.
Swiss Army Man is A24.
Oh, should we do an A24 tier list? Holy shoot.
Oh, that sounds like fun. Ex Machina is A24. Uncut Gems is A24. Lady Bird is A24.
How many are there?
Oh, Lady Bird is a special film.
Too many.
Too many.
That's a crazy tier list.
That'd be an amazing.
That would be the
list.
only. That might be the only list that rivals Marvel for the too many A's and S's.
We got to do this.
Good Time is A24.
Yeah, Good Times A24.
Yeah, we got a lot going on
Do
here.
they even have a C? What have they released that I wouldn't?
Oh, I think they do have a couple of C's.
I'd have to look at the list.
They may even have a D or an F.
Is Hereditary A24?
Probably.
I think so.
I think they did all three of his.
Only I don't really like Killing of a Sacred Deer and movies like that. Like,
I like Yorgos a lot.
There too.
I like his.
They're two out there for me.
But Lobster. Well, no. His
like
other
Lobster
one, the favorite, was an A24.
I like Dogtooth.
Dogtooth is great, but I don't know that that's A24. I think that was like independent. I think that was his first breakout.
Why do you guys think the Daniels? So this is an interesting question because the Daniels obviously gave them their highest grossing film of all time. Yeah. They're very, very filmmaker oriented studio, which is interesting because obviously, like, considering Nolan went to Universal, you start to wonder, like, what's Universal doing for filmmakers? Because obviously Jordan Peele has completely free reign over what he wants to do, which is great, and he deserves it. But you start to wonder, like, if I'm the Daniels and you give them their highest grossing film, is it weird then to jump to Universal? And I get the business. I understand.
I thought that way, but I think, I'm sure that they're like proud of that. I'm sure that, like, I imagine that they're like very happy to see them, their success as filmmakers. But Everything Everywhere All at Once cost them $25 million. A deal at Universal gives them the chance to spend $150 million potentially on a movie.
And then that gets risky because when you...
And A24, I don't know what their most expensive movie is.
It's got to be.
They're all kind of in that same range.
Hereditary was. It looks like. Oh no, those are grossing.
Green Knight might have been expensive.
I don't think Green Knight was expensive,
but I don't think I don't think they've ever spent. Surely have never spent $100 million on a movie.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of the Daniels might be working that way, or at least that's what they sold Universal.
My concern would be, though, when you, and again, and this goes all the way back to Jaws, obviously not an A24 film, Universal film, but in terms of necessity is the mother of invention. When you're making Everything Everywhere All at Once for $25 million, that's a lot of money in general. That's nothing for what that movie looks insane. Like. Yes, like that film, if you think about every single costume design and set piece that I was going to say, just
costume alone. Yeah.
Michelle Yeoh's. I mean, I can't even imagine, like, even that shot where it's just like 30 different versions of her quickly cut together. She did all of those. Yeah. And that's why I worry about when a filmmaker goes to a larger studio and they're given a lot of money, because then you take away almost that aspect of like, oh, we need to do it this way, because Jaws obviously works because the shark didn't work, right? And so these little things that come out of budget problems end up becoming the biggest things of what makes a movie great. And I think the Daniels are smart enough not to allow a budget to mess up their process, but I kind of like
that example. You know, when Spielberg got a budget, he didn't lose who he was. It almost amplified who he was. But that is rare. You're right.
Amplified.
There we go. Real quick, before we move on to the HBO Max kerfuffle segment, you mentioned the Green Knight is potentially up there. How much? What's the budget you think on the Green Knight?
I'm gonna guess. See,
Everything Everywhere was 25 for reference of
65.
No, Green Knight
only because David Lowery had some cachet with them.
Kev, what's your guess?
So I think Green Knight looks really expensive, but if you think about it, it's kind of all set in a very small.
Because I think
area.
Ghost Story cost him $35. It was like a pie and a sheet.
I'm gonna say $20 million for Green Knight.
According to this, $15 million is all they spent on the Green Knight.
What?
I'm telling you. That's
Wow.
the point I'm making
Yeah.
is look at what these directors are doing with
Yeah.
these budgets. Like,
But
it's
I think that answers the question about why they went to, or why the Universal switch happened, is I think Universal has the opportunity to give them a much larger budget, and who knows what scripts they're sitting on or ideas they're sitting on that
And
could be even bigger.
I don't think A24 holds a grudge against any filmmaker that moves up to the next
I think
level.
that's their business model, you know?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think
Good point.
they find the next up and comer.
If you can
And
spend
give
$25
them-
million and make $100 million, you're doing fine in Hollywood.
Absolutely. I mean, here as we talk about budgets and the leeway that gives you, whether you're working for A24 or even a studio like Warner Brothers, this recent news about the Batgirl, which everybody's probably up to speed on at this point, goes to show you that a $90 million film can be flushed or shelved if you're a big studio like Warner Brothers, which is relatively insane. So just to give you guys a very quick background, in case you're hearing about this for the very first time, there was a Batgirl film, not series, that was going to be going to HBO Max. It was always supposed to go to HBO Max. It was not going to get theatrical distribution. And Warner Brothers decided the new regime, now that the Warner Brothers Discovery merger is coming together and David Zaslav is the new CEO, he's overseeing everything and he's looking at DC Films. And in his opinion, DC Films needs to be held to a higher standard than it was held by the previous regime, which would allow things like, not to knock them, but like a Birds of Prey film, or I'm trying to think of another really good example because the Matt Reeves ones don't necessarily fit. Maybe Shazam. Maybe Shazam even falls under that. When he thinks, I think he thinks that they should be focusing on the Trinity, which is Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. And the critique of we can't even get a Superman movie off the ground, and here we are releasing a Batgirl movie, made him decide that he was going to just pull the plug on it. And, you know, you start to ask, well, what was the reason? And they said it was some test screenings, but then you heard that the test screenings were the same for both Black Adam and another Warner Brothers film that ended up being really successful. I forget which one it was. Then there was a lot of conversation, and rightfully so, about just the bad look that it gave of canceling a superhero film with a Latina actress in Leslie Grace, who people know is talented with In the Heights, watched her in The Heights, and giving her this opportunity to be a superhero. And then one of the things that really stuck with me is Bilal and Adil, who everything I've seen them do so far has been not good, but great. They revived the Bad Boys franchise that had been dormant for a really long time and made it really exciting. The 2 episodes of Miss Marvel that they did were fantastic. They were the ones that were loaded with style and loaded with attitude and fit really well with the character and made people excited for what are they going to do with Batgirl. So it's, you know, we'll never really know the full story, I don't believe, about why they decided to pull the plug. But it feels like they want to do a reset at DC specifically, DC Films, and bring in a team, as they say, a creative team that's going to map out a 10-year plan and decide where it's going to go as a studio. Now, the problem is I feel that DC is already so far down a road right now that is not under a coherent plan that trying to wrangle it into a workable universe is going to be really, really difficult because Matt Reeves is working in a corner of the landscape that it doesn't connect to everything else. And if you tried to make it connect to everything else, it wouldn't work necessarily. We've had conversations about how do you put Superman or Wonder Woman into the Gotham that he's created. It's too grounded. It's too realistic necessarily. Black Adam is about to be introduced as, you know, they're like, oh, he's going to become the new Thanos for DC. But how do you do that with The Rock? He's such a likable guy. And how does he connect? And then the issue of The Flash, which I don't even know if we're going to get into The Flash in this conversation, but it's coming with a lot of baggage that could prevent that movie from even seeing the light of day. Like between now and when The Flash is supposed to come out next year, I'm not 100% confident that it's going to get released. Because, you know, one of the things in the Batgirl movie that they didn't take into consideration and just axed anyway was that it was going to be another Michael Keaton in Batman, which you think would be just the nostalgia alone would be worth releasing.
Think about that.
So,
think about what you just said. We might miss out on 2 chances. There's Michael Keaton as Batman in 2 different, because he's supposed to be in Batgirl as well.
yes.
2 different times we were supposed to see him as Batman. We might never see either of them.
Sean, you're
Crazy.
obviously somebody who knows a lot about this subject. So I'm just going to ask you flat out, how can they possibly release The Flash? And why has The Flash not been canceled if Batgirl was canceled?
The answer to that, I think, is strictly money, the amount of money that I think this Flash is closer to a $200 million film than the $90 million film that Batgirl was going to be.
Still a lot, though, man.
But they can write it off as a loss.
90 is definitely a lot. And yes, and I believe that there was an article that said that it was a tax write-off and they had to make a decision by a certain amount of time in order to make it eligible for this tax write-off that they wrote Batgirl off as.
Do you think they're banking on the idea that general public doesn't know Ezra Miller's issues? And I say issues, but I mean that by like the legal issues he's going through.
I would say it's less that they're banking on them not knowing. Yeah, the legal issues, controversy surrounding his behavior and all that stuff, we're not going to dive into here because it doesn't really make sense for us to try to unpack that. But that information is out there and is available to you if you want to read about it. But it's damning stuff. And it would make sense for them to cancel it. I would say the gross studio thing that I think is happening instead is that they're hoping, what they've been hoping is that it'll somehow get resolved and will somehow.
It's getting worse.
Oh, no, I know. I'm not saying they're winning this bet, but I'm saying I think their bet is, well, it's a long time before that's supposed to come out. We don't need to release any press materials on it. Let's just, hopefully by then, the news cycle is so crazy these days that we can just act like it never happened and we can release it. Like that might be what they're banking on and not that people don't know.
Ezra Miller,
do know. It's very
Ezra
public.
Miller isn't like super well known, I guess. That's the only thing I could think of, like in terms, and I don't mean that like in our world he is, but like if my mom and dad were like, oh, I really want to see The Flash, I don't think they would say that, but they probably have no idea that the lead star of that movie.
DC's Flash isn't trying to make isn't trying to do what Thor, like they're still not on the level of Marvel. Like they're still just playing to a DC audience. Like it's a smaller audience, I think.
But the comparison that I'm bringing up is Armie Hammer and what Death on the Nile had to do recently. And Death on the Nile was, they were afraid to do, and press is interesting, like because we're so dialed into press, right? But like Disney didn't really know what to do with that because he was like a co-lead in that. He wasn't even the main guy, like Gal Gadot, I think. But he's in it a lot, exactly. And the problem with Ezra, and Kevin, when you ask like how come they're not pulling the plug on it, like yes, obviously he's the lead, but there are a lot of other things that are happening in that movie that I think the studio doesn't necessarily want to bail on just yet. Sasha Calle is supposed to be introduced as the new Supergirl. Again, we talked about Keaton potentially coming back, and then just the amount of people that worked on that film that like are not responsible for the things that Ezra Miller did. You know,
thousands of people.
Yeah. Do you can it just because, you know, your lead actor is involved in headlines like this? Now, you could argue, yes, you know, that like these things are far more important than a frivolous superhero movie. Yeah. But there's also a lot of people who put their blood, sweat, and tears. The Muschiettis, you know, probably think that they put together a really great movie, but like how do you release it? I have no idea. It's really complicated.
Could you see a scenario where they go ahead and release the film and they just tell people up front that Ezra's not going to be doing press because of the news and we hope you enjoy the film regardless? And that's one question. And then two, and this then feeds back into the Batgirl discussion. It's like it just seems so unfair to Batgirl because like Leslie Grace isn't in any trouble that we know of. Obviously, like Ezra is in the news, and I don't say that at all in a funny way. I feel that it's interesting that like that film, whether it had bad test screenings or not, comes with, well, when we can tell again based on the surface level, a clean slate. And no controversy in that sense, right? And then here you have something that's super controversial and obviously could hurt the film. Right. And you just wonder like why one gets canceled and the other one's continuing.
That's the thing. Hopefully someone writes a book, you know, like 10 years from now. I'm not pointing at you, Sean, but that's one of those Hollywood stories like.
Do you guys think Flash comes out?
I think I think it does, but I think it's too early to have like a really good guess on that. The Batgirl situation for me that sucks. No, I don't think so. I think it would cost too much money because apparently he's in like more than most. I think I read more than like most superhero movies.
There's multiple versions of him in the movie.
Right. The quote that I saw was that he's basically in like more than most other titular character superhero movies. He is in more shots than typical because he's like it would just be to reshoot. But no, the Batgirl situation. The thing that I think is ironic is that, and it just kind of sucks the studio politics of it all, is if this has gotten so much interest, and the Batgirl being what it is, and just sort of superheroes being what they are, if they were to release this in theaters and just say like, we're not going to do this, we don't like this, like that's an awful thing to say about a movie when you release it. The curiosity of the audience alone would probably give it $500 million. Like it would sell, it would make like, if not more, from people wanting to see what it is that they're not wanting to put out.
Sean, I don't know if you can answer this, or Gabe, if you can answer this. So, okay, we've obviously seen situations where fans rise up and get things released.
John, you familiar with anything?
Yeah. So
all too familiar.
Was it Jaws? Your shirt? Was it Jaws? Was it Jaws had a big following?
Do you think that there's a possibility that the backlash could have them reinstate the film and then go to what Gabe was just saying just now, and now it becomes the blockbuster based on it being an underdog in a sense of it being canceled?
I'll jump on that one, Sean, and say that I don't think that following that sort of, I don't know what you call that, expose, that article on the Snyder movement that really undercut it and sort of pointing out that a lot of that was
the bots and
the
stuff.
bot situation, regardless of the details of that, the connotation, the sort of understanding around that situation, that has changed the color of that as a movement. And also the sort of meme disaster of Morbius getting pushed by the fans to re-release itself. Like, I don't think fans have a lot of sway for studios at the moment where they would feel any pressure, especially if it's the situation where they're really cutting it to write it off, you know.
Well, and that's the thing.
We'll never see it.
I'll play devil's advocate in this sense. Yeah. If David Zaslav really wants to improve DC, because I think we could argue that for the past few years, DC has had a mix of, hits and then movies that were kind of like.
Ironically, it's made interesting movies though. Like Birds of Prey, because it was allowed to kind of be its own thing, was an interesting movie.
Yeah, it was great.
Batman is a fantastic movie. Like,
yes, I think Joker is fantastic.
Yeah.
I think Joker is a really great movie that wouldn't have come from a studio system that was trying to fit everything under one umbrella. It was an example of this director has an idea. Let's give him some rope.
Made $1 billion with an R rating
and got like 10 Oscar nominations. How many did it have? 10 or 12 or something?
And it's getting a musical sequel. Is that
Lady Gaga? Yeah, super bizarre. But if he honestly feels that he wants DC films to pivot in a different direction, and it takes them completely breaking from whatever they had and just clean break, and from here on out we're going to do what we're going to do. Then whatever movie it was going to be in the crosshairs, and it happens to be a $90 million Batgirl movie.
Yeah, but Flash is in the crosshairs.
Yeah, Flash is still in the crosshairs. You're right. Under that standards, that movie should still be up for grabs. Oh, yeah, same. There's a lot of time between now and then. I'm telling you. So,
Sean,
yeah.
All right. Yes. Today is August 9th.
Yes.
I'm gonna say that I think Batgirl comes out.
Oh, interesting.
I think they're going to finish it and it's going to come out. I just have a hard time believing, and I know the story. I know what, and Gabe has great points.
Well, the situation, the thing we haven't touched on yet, and we do have to move on, but like there's also a very strange thing happening where HBO Max is getting, don't know the adjective to include here because they haven't really been clear about it. Right. Merging with Discovery Plus, with that whole overarching merger. And next year they've promised there's going to be a new thing that is going to have all of that content, supposedly, but they haven't been clear about it. And so it's hard to make a guess because we don't know. Like, I think HBO Max right now is like the third largest streaming service. I think it's number 3, if I'm correct. It's according to subscriber numbers.
Okay.
I could be off a placement or two there, but I think it's top 3. So they're in this weird place where they're like, are you just going to burn HBO Max as a brand after you spent all this time trying to differentiate from HBO and HBO Go and then
that was let
everyone know that, but they pulled it off. They let everyone know that all this content was under this umbrella, and it's a very popular streaming service. And now it's very strange to me that they're,
I think one of the sad things is that I'm
HBO
not quite
Discovery.
sure.
I don't know what they're going to call it, but
I'm not quite sure if the drum is going to keep beating for Batgirl. I think there were a lot of people who were upset at the decision, and rightfully so. But I don't think it's a Snyder Cut case where people want to see a Justice League.
And the difference being, the Snyder Cut always had a bad movie that they could root against.
For sure.
They could say, we saw that movie and that was bad, and we understand that there's something better that exists. There's an ambiguity and an unknown around Batgirl that I think you're right. It'll probably dissipate. But
I hope Bilal and Adil go back to Marvel. I saw some people saying give them Secret Wars, since Destin Daniel Cretton has the Kang Dynasty right now. Give them Secret Wars. I would love to see them just tear into an Avengers movie like that. That'd be phenomenal.
They haven't assigned a Secret Wars director yet?
Not yet. No, not yet.
Interesting.
So, I
wouldn't mind seeing Bad Boys 4.
Talk to Will Smith.
Bad Boys, what are they going to call it? Bad Boys 5 Life?
They really blew that title. That's so frustrating.
I think they blew it because isn't there a rap song called Bad Boys for Life that uses the 4? I think they couldn't use it or something. Or there's already something that exists.
Is that a Puff Daddy song?
That I don't know, but I think I remember looking that up at one point, and I was like, oh, maybe this is why they were like, let's burn this now.
I'm so old. That feels like something that's been used before. All right. Well, speaking of the debate about whether things are going to streaming or theaters, we had a chance to sit down with Phil Contrino, who's been a friend of the show and he's the director of media and research for NATO, not the NATO that you're thinking of, the National Association of Theater Owners. And they have been supporters of this show from the earliest days because they love the fact that we talk about box office and that we're big proponents of the theatrical experience. And so we wanted to get a chance to sit down with Phil and talk about the state of the theatrical experience and the summer that movie theaters have been enjoying. So we have an interview that we did with Phil on behalf of this show. And this segment is brought to you by NATO. And so I do want to give a huge thank you to them for just supporting the show and putting their weight behind Real Blend and catching you guys up on the things that they are doing and ways that you can help support them. So without further ado, here's Phil Contrino joining the Real Blend podcast. Phil, we look at the box office every week on this show, and we talk about how the films are performing, and it's we've been incredibly encouraged by what we've seen with the numbers that come back in every Sunday and into Monday, and kind of came to the consensus about 2 weeks back that we're okay to say the movies are back. You know, that people are coming back to the theaters and flocking to support their franchises. Do you guys think that we are maybe overselling it, underselling it? What's the state of NATO right now?
No, I think you're right on. I mean, I think looking at the success stories that we're seeing on a weekly basis, it's really encouraging, right? People are excited about the movies. They're coming back for the movies that they're interested in. The challenge that we still face as an industry is just the release schedule is a little lighter than it was in 2019. But that's largely at this point an issue with production lagging and, playing catch up a little bit. And that's a problem that will, be fixed. But it's been a summer of massive success stories that kind of dispel the notion that people don't want to come back and we're, hurtling toward this, inevitable future of a streaming only world, which I don't think anybody wants,
No, definitely. Because I think what the numbers kind of reflected as well, too, is that these franchises that people come to the theaters to see on the big screen, the big spectacle that's delivered by Marvel Studios or the Jurassic franchise, and movies that really held their release dates until they could be back into theaters are performing extremely well. You kind of expect those movies to do well. I think Minions is even crushing, more so than we anticipated. Yeah. And so what was your reaction to the way that those reliable franchises performed?
I mean, it's essential, right? They're kind of keystone of the industry. Blockbusters are always going to be the heart of the industry. But what we need now to come back more is kind of the mid-range, non-established IP titles. It's really, really, really crucial to the future of the industry and the health of the industry to get people excited about those movies again and coming back to those movies. And there have been obviously some big success stories on that front this summer. Obviously the biggest one being Everything Everywhere All at Once. I mean, just a massive success for A24 to have their biggest box office hit ever is a huge accomplishment. So
Bill, do you think that was word of mouth that helped power that?
Word of mouth, and also a segment of the movie-going population saying, this is the thing that I want. Not everybody goes to see Thor or Top Gun or Minions, right? There's a big section of the movie-going population that wants an everything everywhere all at once, or Marcel the shell with shoes on. You know, in movies like that, or Elvis even, which, you know, is somewhere in between all of those. So and it's really crucial for the box office because, you know, you have the big tentpoles, but they don't get you to where we were in 2019 on their own, right? You need the full breadth of it.
Well, how exciting is it too to see a name like Jordan Peele build an audience? You know, when you know that he's making films like Nope that are going to be for the theatrical distribution, like he'll shoot with IMAX cameras, you know, and he wants to make sure that that's part of the immersion and the experience, and then to see a film like Nope perform as well as it has.
Yeah, you know, I think there's a big misconception that when people go to the movies, they only want safe and comfortable.
Yeah.
That's a big part of what they want. And they're always, you know, that's why we've had the hits that we've had this summer. But more and more, I think people really want to be surprised and shocked and really engaged in that way by the movies they see. And that's why Nope is such an important movie. And what Jordan Peele is doing is so important. By building a brand, turning his name into a brand of something that people say, okay, this is going to engage me. I'm going to walk out of this movie and be talking about it. I'm still thinking about that movie. Yeah. You know, it'll randomly pop up in my head in a scene, and you know, I've seen it once. I'm going to go see it again. I feel like there's a lot that I missed, and it's one of those movies that you can't have a knee-jerk reaction to either. You know, I think reacting to that, you know, it's got to simmer.
Well, both of those titles that you brought up, Everything Everywhere All at Once and Nope, are films that required repeat viewing. You know, it was almost like, I can't wait to see this movie again. I have to get back into the theaters and experience it, especially with the crowd. You know, Nope in particular, where the crowd was, I've seen it twice. That second experience was completely different the first time through.
Right.
And I think that's only the type of experience you get when you get a challenging filmmaker like Jordan.
Well, yeah, I mean, I remember, you know, I saw Get Out in theaters, right? And the ending has this like rapturous kind of response. And then I watched it again at home. And, you know, when his friend turns up in the police car, which was like the big moment in the movie, it just fell flat. You know, at home, it was just like, okay, I miss the experience I had when I was in the theater with it. And I mean, you know, you see a lot of movies like that where they're clearly edited with, you know, the fact that the crowd is going to react to it in mind. And then when you watch it at home, it's like that moment doesn't work quite as well. So
let's talk about another movie that has been pulling people back to theaters in massive waves, and that's Top Gun Maverick. It is unlike, to me, and I've been doing this for decades now at this point, unlike anything I ever thought I was going to see again. You know, just a movie that has the legs that it has shown. You know, it reminds me a bit of Titanic, almost, where Titanic was always at the top of the box office. Right. You can't go anywhere this summer if I'm at graduation parties or just social gatherings and people are constantly asking me if I've seen it, what did I think of it? Were you guys, knowing that it's Tom Cruise and knowing that it's a proven brand, were you still at least surprised at how well it performed?
You know, I guess not really, because we actually had it at CinemaCon. Yeah. We had the first screening of it, really, I think, publicly. And you know, you can feel that you can feel the energy in the room from the exhibitors and from the media and just from everybody, you know, and you knew this was going to massively exceed expectations, especially even like looking at Tom Cruise's box office history, and it just completely shattered that. And I think, you know, the appeal there was the fact that it was a true throwback to those movies from the 80s, which, and I mean this as a compliment, barely had a plot, right? It was like, you know, that was my first reaction out of that. It's like, this movie was just about great action scenes and funny one-liners and everything like that. And that's totally in line with the 1980s, right? Yeah. And yeah, so I mean, for that to do what it did, it's just amazing. And it's still playing. And it shows the importance of kind of giving a movie room to breathe in the theaters, right? And letting people experience that way. Will I ever watch Top Gun in my house? I don't think so. Right. Like, I mean, I just don't picture myself doing that because it's not going to be even remotely close to that.
No.
Whereas other movies, I will. I see 50 to 100 movies in theaters a year, and I still have like a massive Blu-ray collection and all that stuff. But that one, no, not the same.
You talked about what's to come the next several months, and I want to get into your thoughts on the release calendar, but specifically I want to get your comments on the news that a title like Elvis, which was going to have that 45-day window and head to a streaming service, is now removing that 45-day window and staying in theaters longer. That has to be encouraging based on the way things have played out a little bit recently.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's largely filmmaker driven, right? There are a lot of filmmakers that create for the big screen in mind, and Baz Luhrmann is certainly one of them. I mean, he's been aggressively out there promoting this movie in theaters, and that's why we got to that point. I mean, yeah, look, that's another movie that needs to be seen in theater to, I think, really truly be appreciated, and that's the way that people are responding to it. And look, yeah, I mean, like, as a trade association, obviously we don't say, okay, the window has to be this or anything like that. We don't get involved in any kind of business competitive issues, but we do advocate for movies just generally across the board to have their time in theaters and let people discover them there first and foremost. So.
Absolutely. So as we transition out of the summer and into the fall, what do you sort of predict for the next several months when it comes to the release calendar? What do you hope to see happen?
So I'm really optimistic. And I think, the kind of the problem that I talked about when we first started about, how robust the release calendar is, that gets gets better in the fall and the holiday season. I think there's a lot of strength there. And more importantly, it's a diversity of product. There's something in there, for everybody, right? Family titles, to Avatar, to Wakanda Forever, all these massive movies. And then, a lot of what I would call the Oscar bait movies,
Sure.
Right? Which haven't been at full capacity in the last few years, but I think are going to make a big comeback, this year. And Black Adam is another big one, anchoring October. So yeah, I mean, there's just a lot there, and it's typically a massive movie going, period. I'm really, really, really excited about it. And I think most people are too. So
it's remarkable that I keep forgetting that Avatar is coming. Maybe because it's been delayed for as long as it has, or Cameron's been tinkering on it for as long as he has. But like, this is a follow up to, what was, and I think now is again, the highest grossing movie of all time, so this sequel should be so anticipated. And I do think it's going to do extremely well when it hits theaters, but it just keeps slipping off my radar for some reason.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny. This always kind of happens with James Cameron movies where people start to say, well, this movie seems like it might be in trouble a little bit. Like Titanic is, it was like the budget is out of control and this is going to be one of the biggest studio disasters of all time. And I still remember Avatar. I was covering the box office for another site in my past job then. And a lot of people were like, well, they're not even marketing the movie yet. And this is going to be another expensive bomb. And, things turned out well there. So, I think never bet against James Cameron is the moral of the story.
Yes.
And it's like, I think it's really going to surprise people.
I cannot wait to see additional footage from it. So, as we just look ahead to the next couple of months and talking about the franchises that are coming, why do you think it's just so important that the studios offer up diverse options, for the audience, so that, as you sort of mentioned before, there's a little bit of something for everybody, no matter when they decide they're going to try to go to theaters?
Yeah, it's you never want any segment of your audience to look at what's in theaters and say, there's nothing here that I'm responding to, right? Mm-hmm. And I think just generally for the sake of people continuing to view, cinema as a great art form that it is, right? You need the whole scope of it, right? You need the blockbusters that people love, and you need the Oscar bait movies, and you need the even smaller indies that maybe don't get a ton of attention but appeal to a certain crowd. Because if you start to lose people, it becomes kind of a slippery slope, and we really don't want to get into that into that kind of mindset where people are just kind of giving up on theaters because there hasn't been something in there for a few months that doesn't interest them. It's, the conversation, about the dynamic between streaming and theatrical is so important and so vital. And it's a really, to me, it's about what this art form is and how it is supposed to be experienced. And that's on a big screen because that's the way the artists, intend for it to be experienced. Does that mean you're not going to watch a movie at home? Of course not. I see you've got, plenty of, Blu-rays and DVDs back there. And then you see a lot of movies in theaters. It's not an either or situation, but I think the way that people fall in love with movies and in the cinema is by going to see movies in theaters. That's it. So.
Well, and knowing that we have titles in the coming months from the likes of Steven Spielberg, obviously Damien Chazelle is coming back to theaters with Babylon, some really exciting titles where we've seen trailers to already, whether it be Don't Worry, Darling from Olivia Wilde, or The Woman King, which looks fantastic from Gina Prince Bythewood. And then, we talk every week on the show about Christopher Nolan and the fact that he's probably going to reinvent cinema with Oppenheimer. So the future looks incredibly bright, and I just
it does. And I mean, you mentioned Oppenheimer, and that's really funny to me because when I talk about like release schedule diversity, I think it's hysterical and awesome that Barbie and Oppenheimer are going to be opening on the same day in July next year. Like that's exactly what I'm talking about in terms of like diversity of the release schedule, and even this summer to an extent. I mean, I was going back in preparation for this interview and looking at what I saw during the summer and go back. And the 4 movies that I saw in a row were Top Gun Maverick, Crimes of the Future, Marcel the Shell, and Elvis. Right. Like that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, and after that, I felt great because those 4 movies could not be any more different than that. So,
well, and that's exactly why I wanted to have you on, Phil, just to sort of talk about the health of the industry right now and our excitement for things to come. So thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Sean.
Thank you again to Phil for coming on. Thank you to NATO for their support. And make sure you guys keep it here because we're going to have a lot of cool things with NATO coming to the show down the line. Some fun things that we're working out with them. And that transitions us right into the things that are coming to movie theaters that we can send you guys to go see. There's a movie called Fall, which I've never heard of before. I'm not quite sure what that is.
I do like a movie called The Fall, which is really great, by the way, if you haven't seen that movie.
Which one is The Fall?
Do you remember I'll pull it up, the director's name. Hold on a second.
Is that
Jennifer
Tarek?
Lopez?
Yeah, I know that one. I know what you're talking about. He was a very visually stimulating director.
Wait, do I have the name wrong? The Cell was the Jennifer Lopez movie.
Oh, that's the one. I was actually thinking of that one as well, too. You're thinking of The Descent.
You're thinking of
No, there was a movie killed The Fall. Knew I was right. It's Tarsem Singh. Yes.
Oh, it is.
It had Lee Pace. It came out in 2006. It was an incredible visual film. Is that the same filmmaker as The Cell?
I think so. Yeah. Pretty sure.
Okay. Yeah, it is.
This is not that. In addition to a movie called Fall, there's another movie called Summering, which seems like they should be a double feature of some sort. Season. But we don't have that either. But Kevin did go see Mac and Rita on behalf of Speaking with Diane Keaton. How's Mac and Rita? It's one of these body swap movies, right?
Yeah, I did the junket recently for it. It has Diane Keaton, Elizabeth Lail. Elizabeth Lail is a 30-year-old writer, essentially, and her dream as a kid, she always wanted to be an adult. She always wanted to be older and kind of just more chill and always didn't feel like she fit in her life. And so she goes, Simon Rex, who actually is in the movie, she goes to see him. He has some kind of like spiritual tent that he works in, and he puts her in this like tanning bed thing, and she comes out of it as Diane Keaton, a woman in her 70s, and she's freaking out. She's like, why do I look older, and etc. And so the movie's kind of really about her embracing who she is, and like it's okay that she is 30 years old and kind of wants to be more like an older individual. And it plays with a lot of themes of social media. And Diane Keaton, by the way, you forget like how brilliant she is as a physical comedian. Because I mean, you think about like her career has been so interesting, and like all the
just
films
a
that
pro.
Huge career, but think about all the different things she's done with like obviously with Coppola and Woody Allen and Annie Hall and the Godfather films. But it's this latter part of her career that I really, really enjoyed. And I just, what was the film she did with Keanu Reeves? Was it Something's Gotta Give? Do I have that right?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
She is just so funny, like physically funny. And in this film, she has a few moments where they give her scenes where she gets to be physically funny, either doing Pilates or her character does mushrooms at one point. And I honestly just loved, I enjoyed watching Diane Keaton in this realm. Is the movie original? It feels, like you've seen it before, and it's covering themes that you've seen before. Also, want to shout out Taylor Page, who's in it. Who I'm a really big fan of because obviously she was great in Zola. But she did a great track on Kendrick's new record called We Cry Together, where her and Kendrick go back and forth in an argument in a relationship. And it's honestly like, it's incredible. That album, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, is brilliant. But yeah, so the movie Macarita, I enjoyed it. I mean, it was, hour 40 minutes or whatever. And I just kind of was like, it was, I'm not trying to turn my brain off and watch it kind of movie, but it was more of like, I just kind of enjoyed not watching something that was so heavy and so violent. And so, you know what I mean? And again, it depends on where you are in your life. When you sit down and watch something, Macarita might not hit me like it did Tomorrow or something like that. But I just enjoyed Diane Keaton. I also enjoyed the message of being yourself, which is not an original thought, but it is something that Diane Keaton puts forth really well in the film. I find her career fascinating, and I just love how funny she is. And I think she's an underrated comedian, an underrated physical comedian, very funny. And I think it to me, it's interesting to watch her in this part of her career. I think she's mid-70s or so. And she's just still being awesome. And I just love seeing her still work. And that's why I think it's great to see people working older into their years.
I'm going to make a great transition because Lee Pace, who you mentioned earlier, is co-starring in Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. So
great.
Got a little Lee Pace segment going on here in the This Week in Movies. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is terrific. It's probably going to make my top 10 because I rewatched it.
I can't wait until you see it, Kev. Yeah.
Man, I am missing out on this one. I need to see this one.
I rewatched it a second time, and I wanted to see if it held up outside of the festival, the rarefied air of the festivals. Yeah, thank you. And it did. It's still terrific, and it's great too because it is, like I kind of mentioned, an Agatha Christie type mystery. And so once you know the solution, I kind of wondered how much of a repeat value it would have. It's basically a group of 20-somethings who are getting together in a mansion for a hurricane party. There's a hurricane on the way. They know, so they've strapped themselves in with food and alcohol and drugs, and they're just going to party their way through it. And they want to, in the middle of it, play this game called Bodies, 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 which is basically you pick a name out of a hat, and one person has to end up being the killer. They turn off all the lights, and that person has to just touch somebody in the dark, and if you've been touched, you're the body and you die, kind of thing. But, of course, little by little, each of them start to get killed off individually, and you start to figure out who it might be. But the
Ready or Not? Is it Ready or Not?
It's a totally different tone. Different tone, yeah.
And it's not.
You know where I'm going with that, though, right? That was like a game.
It's not, yeah, but it's not. That was very. I don't know if kitschy is the word. That was very much like you're sitting down to watch them play this game. This is very much like it's very real in that it just feels like a bunch of 20-somethings having a party. Yeah. And then things start to go awry and a kind of like a slashery kind of vibe versus the fun playing a game thing.
Because one of the really, really smart things that the script does beforehand is through little bits of dialogue, you start to figure out tensions that exist between certain characters.
Yeah.
Amanda Stenberg is the main character, essentially, who is coming back from being away. And these are all of her grown-up friends, the kids that she grew up with, basically. And she's bringing back a girlfriend played by Maria Bakalova, who the group hasn't met yet. And so introducing her into the social dynamic is uncomfortable as it is. But then Pete Davidson has some kind of romantic relationship with some of the characters. and the way that they snap at each other before any of this starts to go down is interesting. So the whole time you're already playing a game of like, who's mad at who might be going after who. Yeah. And so when the body starts showing up, there's a million different ways that the movie can go. Lee Pace plays the boyfriend of one of the friends, and he's older and he was in the military. And so his whole vibe is just like, I don't necessarily know what's going on here. And at different times he'll say to them, he'll be like, oh, you guys are just fucking with me, aren't you? kind of thing. And at that point, you're also just like, oh, are they? Like, what's going on? It really keeps you on your toes the whole time you're doing it. And the director, Halina, is just so creative, and the way that she used this, it's an actual mansion that they found that they can shoot in, and she knew that it had a lot of the locations that they had written into the script and the way that they could film it. She brought up really something I thought in the interview, if you guys got a chance to listen to it earlier, about how since it was a hurricane party, it allowed her to have these different things that the group would have already brought to a darkened house. One of the characters played by Rachel Sennott, she has neon bracelets and necklaces all over her because she knew the power was going to go out, essentially. But it allowed them to sort of capture this visually. It looks incredibly cool in the movie. And so it's great. Everything about it is great. It's one of those ones, and we talked a bit about this with the cast during the TV slots that are going to be on Cinema Blend, that this type of premise is really only great, and the movie's going to stand the test of time if it sticks the landing. You know, it could have a very unsatisfying conclusion, and you'd be like, oh, it was fun until that point. But this movie, I feel really, really sticks the landing. And so I can't wait for Kevin to see it. I can't wait for more people to go see it so we can talk a little bit more at length about Bodies. But it's going wide this yes. weekend, and you guys absolutely need to go out of your way to see it. So it's terrific.
I'm excited. You sold me, man.
I've mentioned that I love this movie. I agree with everything Sean just said. I have not had a chance to see it a second time yet, so I'm very excited to. Kevin, I am dying for you to see it because it's really good. It's really smart. And I don't think you've listened to our interview yet, but she talks about some of the lighting that her and her cinematographer had to do, where like they actually had the actors light themselves with like their phones and stuff because they're like walking around with the phones. And Sean mentions like the glow stick thing. It's really smart in the way that it's shot. It's really smart in the way that it's plotted together. And the characters themselves are just incredibly believable. Like it feels like she has her finger on the pulse of that generation and sort of what she wanted to say about that generation and our society in general, while also having a ton of fun with this kind of murder mystery plot that's playing out. And to reiterate to Sean, it sticks the landing like you wouldn't believe. It's so good.
Sounds awesome.
It's so good.
It's so good. Yes. So Bodies. Make sure you guys check that out. All right, that brings us to the blend game. Bodies was not based on a book, but we have been covering a number of different films.
They would have called it Books, Sean.
Yes, they would have. That would have been I'd have gone and seen that. Gabe, we're going to start with you. You get to play book to movie blend. Where are you going? You said you're going with a pretty simple
I'm just going to keep it easy.
Something that came right to you.
Well, I'm just going to keep it easy, and people might argue it's recency bias, although I saw some people write in with this pick, and I don't disagree with them, clearly. And it's Dune. It's Dune. If you've been listening to the show for at least a year now or whatever, you'll know that Dune for the longest time has been, I would call my favorite book ever. Something I poured over as a kid and fell in love with science fiction in that sort of medium, and has influenced kind of the way I digest science fiction and things since then. So I love that book, and the fact that book means so much to me, and that movie is able to nail it, I think is why I have to pick it. I think that it's the tone is perfect. I would say the movie is approachable in the ways that maybe the book isn't necessarily at face value, but it doesn't betray the book in any way while making that true. I think it's casted perfectly. I think that when I watch that movie, I'm excited to read the book. And I don't know that I usually have that feeling with like a book to movie blend or a book to movie adaptation. So that is my pick. There's a ton out there. I won't run through that. There's a ton out there because that kind of like Hollywood's been mining books for content for decades. There's so many out there that like you could pick as favorite movies, and a lot that you didn't have to read the book for this game to work. But there were a lot where I was like, I haven't read the book, so I wonder if it doesn't have the same connection that I have to Dune, having read the book as I.
Right.
So,
Right.
Dune is my pick.
All right, I'm going to try to cheat and tell me if I can do this.
Okay.
Can I do the Harry Potter series?
Sure.
Or do I have to pick a specific...
The whole series?
I would say pick your favorite of the Harry Potter movies, but you can say the whole series as your...
I want to say the whole series, but let me explain why I want to say the whole series. Okay. This was a pretty remarkable run. And I have said this before, and I still sort of stand by it, although maybe the MCU has now replaced this. I think it's the most impressive book to movie adaptation that I've ever seen. The way that they pulled it off, because you have to remember that they started adapting the series before she'd even finished writing the books, right? They cast those kids, and they perfectly cast those kids, then needed those kids to not have an Ezra Miller moment, or something that just like blew them up out of the ability to continue playing the role. Like all those kids stayed like lock solid in step with their roles and their parts and allowed them to complete this franchise. All of the supporting parts are, again, perfectly cast. Alan Rickman, even when you lose Richard Harris and you replace him with Michael Gambon, later on to get into Gary Oldman joining the franchise. And God, who played Mad Eye Moody? Why am I blanking on Brendan Gleeson?
Brendan Gleeson,
across the board, Maggie Smith, everyone in that movie is perfectly cast. You got Helena Bonham Carter joining later, and then Ray Fiennes playing Voldemort. Like every time they added another level to those adaptations, I found it to be staggering. And I if I had to pick, I don't know if that book is my favorite, but Prisoner of Azkaban is my favorite film in it. And it's unfortunate that Cuarón's is third, because I think he showed the full potential of what those movies could be. Yeah. And then they were great, from that point forward, but they were not transcendent the way that movie is. And they settled into, who's the guy who's doing all the fantastic, is David Yates? They've settled into David Yates as a storyteller, and he's become the voice of that franchise. I wish, the only thing that would have made it better if they just kept trading off directors or allowing more people to sort of bring their voices to it. But I'm going to throw that out there. I really enjoyed the books. I think it's really fun when somebody can create, listen, all the things with J.K. Rowling aside, when someone's able to create a universe from scratch. And I've seen those hilarious TikToks that tell you that it's basically just Star Wars. Yeah. Maybe it is just Star Wars. But and we were just in Universal when we went to Orlando, and to step into the Harry Potter world at Universal Studios you're reminded again of this world that she built, of the school and Diagon Alley and all these really cool places that you can just go visit, ride the train. It's exciting. You're on the train that connects the two Harry Potter worlds, and they do this really cute gimmick where shadows of the characters come up to the door that you're sitting in, and they're like, "Oh, I think we can use this one." And they're like, "No, I think it's occupied by first years." And it's the characters, it's their voices. You know who it is, and it just permeates your whole pop culture. And it's, that adaptation either shouldn't have worked as well as it did from the start, or should have probably fallen apart at some point throughout it. And I think it stays extremely consistent all the way through to the end, even though I know that Kevin has a problem with the final confrontation. Maybe it's a little bit too short, admittedly, but there are amazing moments throughout the course of the Harry Potter franchise. And I'm going to pick that for book to movie blend. And again, like Gabe said, there are millions of options you could have gone with. So that's what I've
talked about how much I love that series, and I would agree with you on that. And I would say, to your point, because I love when you bring up just how perfectly it went for them, save the creator of the franchise in recent years going off the rails. Yes. But for the actors and for the films, how great it went. I always point to that as, and maybe it's weird to think Chris Columbus is underrated, but I think Chris Columbus is underrated because he started that franchise. He cast those actors. He built the visual world. I think so much of that he set on the right track, let alone Home Alone and all the things that he's done. I think people kind of forget just how much of a masterstroke. Yeah, how much of a masterstroke that was for him, as a world builder and as being able to tell us stories at that scale.
And he started it. He had to start the whole visual language of that. Of the movie.
He cast those actors. He had to sit down with probably definitely thousands of kids and figure out who was going to play these characters that they knew that they were buying into at that point of like, you know, this is going to be a long time. This is going to be a decade of us making these. Like they were ready for that.
It's a hell of a gamble. And
literally
and in terms
boyhood.
of that franchise, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's a good way to put it. Kev, where'd you go?
I'm going to kind of go in your lane a bit, and I'm going to choose the first 3 Lord of the Rings films, just because. Now I do want to preface this by saying that I never read the Lord of the Rings books, but the reason why I chose this is because I think it was like the first time I really felt thankful that a filmmaker translated a material that I just wasn't probably ever going to read. You know, films like Jaws and Jurassic Park and Godfather that are all based on books. I mean, those were all movies before I knew they were books. Does that make sense in my mind?
Yeah.
Like I just didn't really think of them as books. So growing up, my dad always had The Hobbit book on this like one shelf or this one table, and I would go buy it because I lived in the house every single day, and I would just look at the books. And I remember seeing The Hobbit and Tolkien's name, and I didn't know what I was looking at. But then when they announced the Lord of the Rings films or the trailers came out for it, I'm like, oh, that's the same guy who wrote, you know, the Hobbit books. Yeah. And again, this is how my mind was putting it all together. And then I went and saw Fellowship of the Ring, and I'd never seen anything like that before. Just the way Peter Jackson brought that to the screen, and just kind of knowing like how it was shot, how it was broken up, how it was done, translating a book that kind of seemed impossible from what I had heard about it. Excuse me. And the books were super long, right? So I just, in my head, and I have ADHD, so I have a hard time sitting through a whole book. I don't read as much as I should. And so when I saw Fellowship of the Ring, I was like, I didn't know what Peter Jackson had done in terms of translation because I didn't read the source material, but I knew that I was watching something that was coming from somebody who was so passionate about the material that they read that they were then giving their visual perspective on what they read. And I never wanted to go back and read it because I didn't want to have any other image of that world outside of what Peter Jackson gave me. And I remember, and it's interesting because I'm not a huge fantasy fan in terms of genre. I love all genres of films, but Lord of the Rings probably wouldn't have spoken to me that I know of. But when I sat down and watched the visual language of that film and the way Howard Shore scored it and the way Peter Jackson decided to shoot it and the practical nature of what they were doing with I'm blanking on the terminology. Force perspective. Yeah. And kind of having the hobbits look smaller than Gandalf and then that Howard Shore score, that's Lord of the Rings for me. The books are a completely different entity. I don't even want to open them. And I know it sounds kind of closed off, but I just don't want another image of what that world is. I like what Peter Jackson's given me. And maybe one day I'll, if I grow old and I have all this time on my hands, I'll peek into it, but I'm not going to not be able to not see Elijah Wood and Sean Astin and everybody who's involved in the film. But Return of the King was a monumental moment for me as an audience member because I had never seen action on that scale before. And again, I'm choosing this just purely based on the cinematic aspect of what Peter Jackson did. But it was the first time, and I've said this before, that I had tears in my eyes just based on purely spectacle of the action, like the large epic scale of that main ending fight where you have in these, would you call them elephant characters sweeping people off the ground in these fight sequences. And it's funny because I'm sitting in these theaters with actual Lord of the Rings fans who are experiencing the film themselves. And then I'm the guy who has not read the material, who's just kind of taking it in from what Peter Jackson's giving me. And it's weird because my journey with Peter Jackson has been really strange because when I was in 6th grade, my buddy rented this film called Dead Alive or Brain Dead, wherever you might find that film. It has different titles. It's a brutal zombie film. And then I saw that, and then I saw Meet the Feebles, and then I saw The Frighteners with Michael J. Fox. And I didn't understand what I was watching yet. But that filmmaker became ingrained in my mind. And so when I saw the visual language of Lord of the Rings, which as a big budget film, it's still shot like a really cool old school, like those canted angles.
Well, they argue it's an indie, you know?
Yeah.
That cast argues it's an indie.
And it's a huge production, and obviously the effects are incredible, but it felt like it was coming from the filmmaker that I had watched, Dead Alive and The Frighteners. Just that it's just weird, like really strange tone. And then just the birth of Andy Serkis, in terms of my particular perspective, learning about performance capture through what he was doing. Performance capture changed in that series of films essentially, and obviously has grown with the Apes movies. But yeah. So anyway, so Lord of the Rings just has there's a lot of attachment that I have emotionally to what that film gave me, and it's since it's based on a very, very popular book series. Like I just, you know, that to me was the first one that came to mind. Yeah, so that always meant a lot to me.
Kev, that series for me is huge it's one of those projects that's huge for its behind the scenes material. Like at that age, being obsessed and kind of learning how the magic was made. Yeah. That and even the Hobbit behind the scenes stuff is really interesting too. But like learning how they made it and watching that is a part of the emotional experience for me as well. There's a clip 100%. That I watch when I want to feel, I don't know, this is cheesy, but like the magic of movie making and like excited about that is the last shot. I don't know if you've seen that clip where it's just him and Elijah. It's Peter Jackson and Elijah, and they're doing it's the last shot of the Lord of the Rings. Like not of the Lord of the Rings, but they're doing. And although it is at the end of Return of the King when he's writing in the book.
You're talking about a behind the scenes shot.
Behind the scenes shot. Okay. And it's such an emotional thing. I get teared up watching it, and Peter Jackson doesn't want to stop. He's been doing this for, was it 3 years or whatever they shot those back to back. He's like in tears and just like telling Elijah, like, let's do one more. Like, let's just do it. They just keep doing, he's like, let's just keep doing one more. Let's do one more. And they just do them over and over again because they don't want to stop. And then he says cut and he's like, we're done. And then they just like hold each other for like minutes, like bawling because they've been on this journey. I love that. I'm getting kind of teared up thinking about it. I love that.
That's clip. Amazing.
That's how Real Blind's going to end one day.
Yeah. Well, Gabe brings up a really good point. That's another.
Oppenheimer.
No, but Gabe brings up a good point because it was. You're right. Lord of the Rings was really kind of my vehicle into special features. I mean, I always dug them, but like when you learn about performance capture for the first time, and
he was so transparent about it too, was the huge thing. Like they invested in like showing you how it was made because they knew they were breaking ground. And
dude, when King Kong came out, I remember getting like a special edition DVD that like was like a booklet of how, because again, that was also Andy Serkis playing King Kong. And like, you're so right, Gabe. It's like, gosh, like Jackson was kind of really integral in my filmmaking understanding of the process. Sure. And like he really was. It's funny. I don't even really honestly stop to think about how much Peter Jackson really meant to me. And I sat down with him one time only, and it was nice because I got like 9 minutes with him for that incredible World War I film that he re-brought back. And just to sit with him and talk Lord of the Rings was pretty special, man. Like that was, I kind of sleep on how much Peter Jackson kind of influenced my love of filmmaking. Yeah.
The King Kong New York sequence on the new LG TV. Pretty spectacular. Dude, pretty spectacular.
King Kong I like King Kong because it's about movie making.
Yeah.
Like I know people don't love that film.
It's probably a really great hour and 45-minute movie, but he made it 3 hours.
I think it's awesome.
It's excessive.
Is it one of those he had a little too much clout?
Probably. And this is after Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
Yes. Too much. And passion for the source material.
Of course. Yeah.
So, he wasn't going to cut any of it, essentially. But someone needed to come in there. Like when Quentin tells that story about, getting Sally cutting up the scene from Pulp Fiction. She was like, she's like, go take a walk, go get a coffee. When you come back, there's going to be a better version of this movie, of this scene.
The Bruce Willis scene?
Yeah, the Bruce Willis cab scene.
Oh, I forgot.
Wait, we got to touch base on the fact that Kevin doesn't listen to our interviews with Quentin Tarantino. Have you listened to any of them?
I can't listen to his stuff. It's like it's too weird for me.
So weird.
No, I'm there. I edit my own videos for in general, and I it's weird for me. I mean, I have a really hard time watching it now. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I've gone back and listened to clips of things I've never Yeah, I don't think I've ever listened to any of them.
It's pretty good. You should listen to them.
I mean, I was there.
They turned out pretty good.
I was there asking questions. I remember.
All right.
But all right, I'll go back and listen to it at some point.
I think Jake is going to pick Jurassic Park. So let's throw it to Jake and see if his pick for a book to movie blend is indeed Jurassic Park.
Hey guys, I am so sorry I could not be on this week's show. I'm in a bit of a magical place right now. I know this week is all about book adaptations and our favorite book to movie adaptations. And you know, one of the best, really, of all time is where I'm at right now. Take a look behind me. I am in Dyersville, Iowa. Some people call it heaven. Some people call it the shooting location to the 1989 classic Field of Dreams, which would be an incredible pick for anyone if you wanted to pick that, because so much magic took place on that field where I'm standing right behind me. I really hope you're watching this on YouTube. Otherwise, it means nothing to you. But, you know, if I were to pick my favorite adaptation, it would probably be Jaws, or it might be Jurassic Park. Spielberg knows how to adapt a novel like no other director. But I've talked about those movies so extensively, so I really wanted to try to pick something fresh, and I really want to pick Peter Jackson's adaptation of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I mean, what J.R.R. Tolkien did with his novels, it meant a lot to so much people. He created a world on those pages, and that is obviously a phenomenal achievement that is unreachable in the world of literature. But what Peter Jackson did, he didn't just adapt those words for the screen. He brought Middle Earth to life. He brought Frodo and Gandalf and the orcs and Saruman and Sauron to life in a way that I'm not sure anyone else could. I mean, I guess we'll find out in a couple of weeks with Amazon. But those adaptations, I think, are some of the greatest achievements of all time, just in terms of on a technical, on an emotional, on a cinematic level. I mean, those are some of the greatest cinematic experiences I've ever had in my entire life. So maybe not necessarily my favorite, because my favorites are movies I've talked about way too much, but I had to give a shout out to that. And then of course, to where I'm at right now, beautiful Dyersville, Iowa, Field of Dreams, an amazing cinematic adaptation, 1989. On that note, guys, I'll be back with you next week. Thank you for giving me the week off as I'm here in heaven. Love you guys, miss you guys, be back soon.
Thanks, Jake, for throwing in a pick. Audience picks. Mike Bratch went with The Postman, and then he said, yes, the 1997 Kevin Costner 3-hour epic, which I didn't know was a book. So there's that. James Vasquez went with Nocturnal Animals, Aerial Pace, The Hours. Danny Gertch, when you started to say a modern film or a recent film, Gabe, this is where I thought you were going. Danny Gertch said Greta Gerwig's Little Women, which is a terrific adaptation of a obviously classic book. Movie. Amanda Young went with Catching Fire, and Kimberly Sue said Perks of Being a Wallflower, which is a terrific film, and I didn't know it was a book either. So there you go. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating. Next
Did you know Forrest Gump was a book?
I only know that because I was looking up books that are adapted to movies, and I saw it on the list. But no, I didn't know that prior to.
Neither did I. I learned that today when I was looking up like books to movies. Gabe, did you know Forrest Gump was a book?
I think Jake has talked about that at one point as the only reason I knew. I saw it as well when I was doing research, and I was like, reminded of it, but I wouldn't have.
I know that there's a sequel too. There's a book sequel to Forrest Gump. Yeah,
really?
The person who wrote Forrest Gump wrote another Forrest Gump book,
like Dr. Sleep style.
Yeah,
less supernatural.
Yes, and less dead children on baseball fields. Yeah. But I also do think that like Zemeckis and Hanks talked about potentially doing it, but that the story is not good. The story's not there.
You can't do a sequel to that movie.
Sean would argue it was never there, but
good point. Yes. Next week, #Allison Brie blend. #Allison Brie blend.
Interesting.
So let us know your pick via email at realblend@cinemablend.com.
And I'll say it's actors are performance. Sorry, actors are performance. So TV is open. Her especially. She has a ton of great television work. People love.
I have to ask you, Gabe, how did you come to the Allison Brie pick?
She has a movie coming out next week. Which was like, that's a good excuse. And then we just hadn't played her yet, and I looked at her filmography, and I was like, yeah, she's got a ton of really great stuff.
I always love like as Gabe will pull random ones out, but I'm always wondering what the narrative is. Like, okay, she has a movie coming out, it makes sense.
I usually try to go with someone who has a movie coming out. If I can. We're running out of names to necessarily do that with, but it's usually random.
Dave Franco is directing a movie with the two of them, I believe, soon.
It's called Somebody I Used to Know. Yeah,
so
she and Dave wrote it, which is cool. or Allison and Dave wrote it, and obviously, they're married in real life. But I just interviewed Dave Franco the other day for Day Shift, and I told him I'm excited about that movie. I think, is he releasing that this year? Because he's a really good director. We had him on for The Rental, and we should hopefully get him on. It'd be cool to get him.
He was a great
Allison.
interview too.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Maybe we can get him and Allison on for that because she wrote it too with him. Yeah. I'm assuming they wrote it.
And you're listening. We're interested.
Yes, please hook us up. I asked Jamie Foxx not to detour off that because he was paired with Dave Franco for
that's right.
Day Shift, and he also directed his first movie, Jamie Foxx, and it's called All-Star Weekend. But it has been finished for a while and has been kind of unreleasable. Really? Because what he told me in the interviews for Day Shift was that the humor really pushes the envelope.
Oh.
And he said, we went for it. But he said, I don't know if the humor is going to work.
I think I've heard about this. It has a big cast, doesn't it?
It has a huge cast. And
like RDJ is in it, right? I think the one that comes to mind.
And he plays 3 characters, and it takes place over All-Star Weekend, the NBA All-Star Weekend. And I think there's an actor. Wow. There's an actor who plays LeBron James. And I think it's pretty surreal. Like, I think the things they went for. But this just makes me want to see it more. The way that I don't know if it maybe has a Tropic Thunder type thing. You know how we had a conversation one time of like, could they make Tropic Thunder now? Or did they just get away with whatever they got away with when they released it?
Well, we've said that. I said you can, because if you're saying you can't, then you're saying it's trying to say something it's not. It's trying to.
No, I just don't think Robert Downey Jr. would do that today.
Well, now that Iron Man's dead, he might.
But maybe. Also, did you guys see the news that Macquarie and Cruise are going to be adapting a possible spinoff of Les Grossman?
Well, what I read was they don't know if it's going to be like a whole project or if he's going to be a part of one of the other 2 that they're doing.
It's great.
Which I mean, put him in a mission. Put him in a mission movie.
No, it's two other ones outside of Mission. They're working on. Yeah.
It'd be really damn funny if
Tom Cruise
had to take down Les Grossman.
I want fat hands and I want to dance. That's my favorite Tom Cruise quote.
He could do anything he wants.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the fact that Top Gun. No. Oh no, I would argue that Top Gun has given him way more.
Sure.
Avenues. The fact that movie made over $1 billion.
It's given him. It's given him a bigger budget outside of franchises, but like he's always been able to tie himself to the side of a plane.
You know who's totally underrated in the Les Grossman scenes? Bill Hader.
Oh, he's so good.
Bill Hader is hilarious.
Swinging past your knees. He's his little ad libs. So good.
Dude, I told you guys a story. I was at the Tropic Thunder premiere and I didn't know Cruise was in it. And Cruise shows up and I have like this amazing video of the entire cast like posing for a photo. I was young. I didn't know what I was. I wasn't in the like TV junkets yet, so it was crazy seeing all these like stars like 15 feet in front of me. I'm like, why is Tom Cruise here? Oh, he produced the film. Okay, cool. And then I sat down and watched the film, and I had zero clue that was Tom Cruise until the credits rolled.
So
like
funny.
That's how. Like I mean, again, I know I might sound naive, but I did not know that was him. It was such a great performance.
He's under a lot of makeup.
It's so good.
It's great. Anyways. All right. So we'll be back on Monday. Thank you very much, guys, for listening to this week's episode. On Monday, Ribble Premium. So check the description below to find out how you can become a member of that family. New episodes drop every Monday morning. Again, check the description for how to sign up. On social media, we're at Jake's Takes, at Kevin McCarthy TV, at Sean_O'Connell, at Gabe Kovach, and the show is at Real Blend. Jake, at this point, will probably have posted a couple of photos from the Field of Dreams, because that's where he is right now covering that. And we will have some more information about guests that we're going to be having in the future. So until next time, the Fablemans.
Hockey pads and Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer and Oppenheimer.
Just all of it.